Hello everyone, my name is Joshua and this is the 190th video of my video journal series. Today's date is Monday the 17th of August 2026. How's everyone been? I've been pretty good, thank you. And today I went into uni to work on my photography assignment. I had to use a specific piece of editing software called Adobe InDesign. It's basically this piece of editing software where you can alter images, add text bubbles, make your sort of like magazine or visual design project come to life. And I'm not sponsored by Adobe. In fact, I actually going to critique their software because I've used plenty of Adobe software before and plenty of other professional software that my university wants me to use for my assignmts. And it takes a while to get used to their software. It's not like Pixel E or Canva where it's like really easy to use and it's more geared towards newcomers. Adobe software, Sony Vegas and all that. Not that I've used Sony Vegas, but from what I've seen online, it looks extremely complex. Same with Adobe Premiere. But it's just like, and you just got all these like buttons and all these like different controls, and it's not really, I guess, user friendly at all. It's mostly geared towards professionals, but even then, Adobe has faced a lot of criticisms these last couple of years, mostly for, I guess, not really updating their editing software while charging more money and slowly stripping privileges, or I guess um, things that were, I guess, like commonplace then, but then they're like, all right, well, now we're going to, strip these features away, add a premium, or, if you want to simply cancel your subscription, you're going to pay money to cancel it, which is stupid. Uh, and I don't want to keep on, like, I guess, bashing on Adobe in this video, but, like, by God, InDesign, I'm like, there are better alternatives to this piece of software that we could use, but obviously you got to use what the university wants you to use, and I'm not going to say it's complete garbage. It does have its uses, but at the same time, I'm like, well, the teacher posted a tutorial link on how to use that piece of editing software. I think it was like like a bunch of videos that totaled to like 5 hours or something. It was insanely huge. And I'm like, I'm not gonna watch 5 hours of content to do this assignment. So I pretty much had to like learn from scratch. So while I was at uni today on one of their computers, I was just like figuring out how do I make this background like a solid color. I couldn't even figure out how to do that because you got all these like buttons. And I'm like, oh, I should be used to this, right? I'm tech literate. I've used plenty of editing software and Photoshop software before, but I don't know what's the deal with InDesign. But like, I couldn't figure out how to make a page a solid color. Even I don't know. It's just too complex. That's because I've never used it, and I should have most probably went through the tutorial videos. But like, it should come natural. There should be like a paint bucket icon. You just click on it, and it goes a solid color. Instead, you gotta like do things the complex way. You gotta do it like the reverse way, sort of. To even like resize an image is painful. Maybe it was painful because my school they use like Mac computers, so already I'm using a piece of editing software that I'm not familiar with, plus Mac computers. Now I rarely use Mac computers. I just use regular PCs, and for some reason the mouse you had to like literally use all your force so that it can like move an inch on the screen. There was no mouse pad. It was just like a wooden table. So it was just like, really hard to like move the mouse. I should have brought a mouse pad, but even then, like it's one of those like metal mouses, so it just adds a lot of unnecessary weight. So yeah, it took me some while to get used to that, but even then I'm not like fully accustomed to it. But yeah, if you want to do things professionally, you got to sacrifice a lot more of your time and I guess patience. And I guess it is good that I have access to these pieces of software for free as long as I'm a student. I wouldn't be paying out of pocket for these pieces of software, at least for like a subscription, because a subscription can easily um, rack up in the hundreds of dollars, juxtaposed to, I don't know, owning it outright. And yet again, though, like what Adobe's been doing, like they've been doing a lot of anti-consumer practices. Yet again, if I were to make like a whole list, or I could go on and on for like hours, but yeah, so it is, kind of, I guess, annoying, and it will be even more annoying if I had to pay for it, but luckily I don't. I guess it comes through like tuition fees, but tuition fees cover a lot, from school bathrooms to, Wi-Fi access to be able to use these pieces of editing software. So I reckon it's a good deal, and also accessing textbooks online, and that's another thing. All right, I'm going to just talk about this editing software more before I move on to the other things I want to talk about. Yeah, so after I got used to how to, I guess, make a page a solid color, I just had to grab like the pen tool and just like increase the brush size, and I was like, hey, it works, as long as it works. I was able to put all the images in and all that. Then I realized, oh crap, 3 hours have passed, and I'm like around the third of the way there, and I obviously have Wednesday and Thursday to work on this, but it does take some time getting used to, and I wish like they can enlarge the buttons on Adobe InDesign. At least the monitor I was using, for some reason, it displayed all the like icons and buttons like really, really small. There's most probably a way to enlarge, but at the same time, I'm mostly using a MacBook, and I really, don't use MacBooks, so it's going to be a lot harder. And yeah, it's just trying to sort of retrain myself on like, all right, how do I get used to a MacBook again? Because the only time I use Mac software, or I shouldn't say MacBook, I should say Mac computers or Mac operating systems, is pretty much at university. I don't own a MacBook or Macintosh computer. So yeah, it's just like I guess it's also vice versa. If you got like someone who uses Mac computers, they have to like switch to regular PCs. They might find it a little bit tough at first, but it's just human nature. We don't want to, I guess, change things that really work. At least in my eyes, if I already have a computer that I'm used to, editing software that I'm used to, and operating software that I'm used to, why would I make the switch? But anyway, yeah, so it is getting there. I am slowly getting used to Adobe software, and all the many features and all these little tidbits. At the same time, I wish we could just use any editing software. And in my eyes, you don't have to always do the most like fancy edits when it comes to like photos. It's just more about the idea and creative vision. I'll just say less is more. Only include stuff that you really need to. Sort of minimalist design. I really wish Adobe software could be minimalist design, but it seems way too complex for me, my small little brain to handle. And yeah, that's enough. I don't want to really talk more about Adobe, editing software, computers, technology, trying to get used to technology. I'm such a boomer. I'm going to lay all those to the side. All those books are closed. Oh, and what else? Oh, yeah, I was going to mention, the great thing about, I guess, my uni course and all this, I don't have to buy textbooks. But I remember, when I was in high school, my parents had to buy me textbooks for subjects like religion, math, and all that, and even English. And I think I've told this story before, but when I was in, I think it was year 11, um, we had to purchase this Studies of Religion textbook that was like $80. Luckily, I got mine as a hand-me-down, so it was for free. I remember day one of class, our teachers just saying, "Hey, you know that textbook that everyone spent like $80 on? You can just leave it at home. We've got the digital copy on the screen. You don't need the textbooks for the subject." And I'm like, in my brain, why should we buy the textbooks if we're not going to use them? And realistically, the only subject in high school that I remember that used textbooks was like maths, right? Not even in history we used our textbooks. Very, very rarely. Um, Mind you, that is modern history, but yet again, we still had to presumably pay all these textbooks. So that's why I'm grateful that in uni, all the course readings and textbooks are available online, and we don't have to pay for them, which is nice. Yet again, though, we do have to pay like a student tuition fee, which is roughly, I think, around $180 per semester, and that just covers, student amenities like toilets, like I mentioned, and you know, uh, to I guess like no, wouldn't textbooks and all that be covered underneath the individual subjects? That's what I thought. But yet again, though, my university has like a website where you can access like any textbook, no matter if it's science, history, or religion, on their library website. It doesn't matter what course or faculty you're doing. So, by that definition, all that, I guess, content, all that stuff, access to those things will be kind of covered underneath student amenities fee and not the fee for the individual subjects, because that's how I assume. Because if you're paying to do a specific subject at university, and if that money is being used towards getting that subject's readings and textbooks and all that online, then presumably people who only do those subjects are only allowed to access those readings. But no. But yet again, no, I'm not complaining. I'd much rather spend $180 per semester as like a, like a, not really a one-off, but like, sort of like a jack of all trades thing. I can use my university's clean bathrooms. I can use good Wi-Fi. I can access all these readings online and not have to carry around a single physical textbook. Honestly, I remember yet again just drawing comparisons from high school. Just having a backpack filled with textbooks and all that. We just used to leave the textbooks at school actually, but I always brought mine home because I treasured them. Um, but I'm just glad. Um, I don't have to do that sort of thing. And I guess, this video has really been my frustration with analog and digital technologies. Basically, um, old man yelling at cloud, I know. But, just these small little infuriating things, like, oh, you have to use a specific piece of editing software. Oh, you have to bring your textbooks, or you have to buy this textbook, but we're never going to use this textbook, sort of thing. Um, I guess what other things can I talk about in that regard? Oh, there'll be plenty. I guess, um, man, if we're just thinking more towards, like, all right, I guess, like, little sort of nuances, right? Um, um, oh, yeah, I used to remember, thinking about high school, right? Even though I dropped math in year 12, I remember they changed math textbooks. So you can no longer use the old textbook. You had to use the new textbook. So you had to purchase a new textbook. But I'm like, why do you have to purchase a new textbook? Hasn't math largely remained the same for like thousands of years? I mean, obviously, new things have propped up like calculus and all that. But I'm like, well, realistically, like, what is there more to teach about math? You know, uh, and I think the reason why they updated the math textbooks is just simply to get more profit for the publisher. I remember the publisher of those math textbooks went like bankrupt because, no, into liquidation because what they did was, I remember this in high school, with the earlier math textbooks released by this publisher, they put like these access codes at the back of each book. So, it'll be like, I think it was like 5 codes or something like that. And if you put that code into an online website, you'll be able to access a digital copy of that textbook. Sounds great, right? Purchase a physical book and get a digital copy. Well, a lot of people I knew, they just simply bought that textbook. Then, not only did they grab the code for themselves, but then they shared it with like other people, like 4 other people. Because realistically, right? Like if you and a bunch of your mates can just pull your money together to buy like one textbook, and then simply you know distribute the 4 codes amongst yourselves, um you wouldn't have to pay so much to get a math textbook. And to be fair, if you got the digital copy, that would be good enough. So I remember that was like a very good exploit. I think I even did that one time. I think I might have like purchased like a physical math textbook and um, shared the code with somebody else. But then the company went into liquidation because not many people were buying the textbooks. Instead, people were just like relying on other people's textbooks to get the code. And then I remember they scrapped the code feature, or they like heavily restricted it to pretty much one code per book, per account. And that's just like a funny little story. But yeah, textbooks, another infuriating thing. I and to be fair, like I always just when I left high school, I just gave my textbooks away and all that. But they're going to be outdated. They're going to be obsolete because the school wants new textbooks. So then the publisher can make more money. Maybe the school gets a cut. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I don't really see the point in textbooks much nowadays. They're just pretty much a way to just generate profit, like editing software, for instance. But editing software actually have usefulness within today's world. But textbooks, pretty much all the information that can be found in textbooks can easily be found online. So yeah, it's just a blatant way of making money, I guess. uh, and I don't know why college textbooks and all that's so expensive. I heard about it in America. It can just go for like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, for a single textbook. I'm like, why is it so expensive? Especially like research papers online, right? If you want to gain access to like a research paper or a journal article or something like that, it can cost you a lot of money. I guess it's mostly within the professional field, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, if I didn't like, have that, I guess, access by my university, that sort of key to unlock all these articles, because yet again, I pay the student tuition fee, which allows me to access all these scientific articles, all these like literature reviews and scholarly research. If I didn't have that sort of access, I would have had to fork out like hundreds of dollars to acquire this exact piece of information. And yeah, again though, I guess all that money is just used towards new research and all that. And yet again though, the amount of people that actually like buy these things are like incredibly low. Access to online articles or physical research papers. So I guess they're gonna make a money somehow. But if it's one thing I don't like, it is very expensive subscriptions, like very expensive subscriptions to editing software, to access research articles and all of that. Because at the end of the day, it's just terribly, terribly inefficient. And that's yet again why I'm glad to be at a university where I can access all these things for a very, very low price. But at the same time, I'm left with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. I'm laughing my sorrows away. But anyway, I guess to really wrap things up, I really just started off with my little rant about Adobe, but now that sort of just transitioned to like other sort of methods of revenue raising within the education system, like textbooks and all that. You know how publishers want you to keep on buying new textbooks so they can make money. You know, editing software. Wants you to get hooked onto the subscription model and just fork out hundreds of dollars, um, every year so you can edit, photos and all that. And I guess, how that sort of system remains profitable. And, um, yet again, no, like if you, that's yeah, that's pretty much how they make money. And like I said, that publisher that went into liquidation. The reason why they went into liquidation was because, well, people were just sharing the digital codes with others. You know, why pay money on a textbook? I can access this information online using this code. So yeah, I guess that just shows the proof that like textbooks, are just not really needed. All the information found in textbooks can easily be found online, and you get taught that information in class anyway. I don't know why. You need a textbook as a guide, sort of. It just doesn't really make sense. Um, and Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I would like to hear other people's opinions of, I guess, these sorts of issues. Do you think textbooks are really worth the money? Or are they just like I guess, a scam disguise almost? The more I think about textbooks and all that, it just makes. And I'm not sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but it makes me think. Well, you know, you're being taught this content in class anyway. Maybe it could help as a guide. Maybe it's like some activities, but at the end of the day, they're made to make money. And I guess um, you know, Adobe. If I really had to make a final statement on Adobe, I guess to stop their anti-consumerist practices and you know the whole concept of you had to pay money to cancel out a subscription is just absolutely ridiculous in my eyes. And even using their software can be tedious because they rarely update their things. People who've used Adobe Premiere would know how many times that piece of software crashes. Luckily, no crashes with InDesign, though it is really hard to use. And I could be using that sort of similar technology on a site like, I don't know, Pixel E, which is yet again hashtag not an ad, but it's really easy to use and it's very intuitive. In my eyes, at least, might have less features, but I'd much rather use a piece of software that I do know than I don't. And yeah, that is yet again pretty much it. Sorry if I sounded like just an old man rambling, but yet again that was my day. And tomorrow's gonna be a pretty busy day. I'll be in uni all day. Then Wednesday I gotta go back to uni. Then Thursday I gotta go back to uni. Then also Friday, as my studying day, I gotta go back. So yeah, this week's just gonna be very packed, and I will be tired and all that, but I'm still gonna keep on this challenge of making videos. But anyway, that's enough of me talking, and I guess I'll catch you all next time. Bye, see you, take care, catch you all tomorrow.